So we had another question from a viewer that we're going to start off with for this episode.
Yes. So the question is, I'd like to know your thoughts on when someone leaves this present life and they outwardly don't believe in God, source, spirit, etc., or they label themselves as atheists. Once they die, do they remember or do they believe? And from there, accept to come back to the physical being at another time. Like, once they're over there and they're like, okay, I believe, do they come back at another time? Or is everything really happening at the same time?
Okay, so there's a lot in that question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially that last sentence.
So basically is, if they don't believe in God and then they cross over and realize that there is a God, or believe,
And do they realize that there's a God? What are we defining as God, first of all?
Well, let's say the afterlife. Let's say they're atheists. They feel like there's nothing afterwards, and they cross over, and all of a sudden they realize,
that there is something, and they can choose to come back. I think that's part of that makes sense with the question.
Yeah, so they realize they're not the physical body.
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
That life goes on.
Yeah. That was just a transition. It wasn't really a death.
Mm-hmm. So I have to say, I just had a client today that they were patrons in her business. They had come in, and he came in and she said something about him not believing in God, and immediately he said, I do now. And then he further elaborated on that, and he kind of like jokingly said, he's like, oh, I do now. And he was telling her that the power of this vibration of unconditional love, let's call it, because we're not thinking of God as one being, one energy. I'm thinking of it as a collective of this highest vibration of unconditional love that we can imagine. Mm-hmm. And he said that despite his beliefs in this lifetime and the way he acted because of those beliefs and the pain and struggle he went through, he said he believes because of the way he was received as he crossed over. And he said that there was such an incredible love that he was humbled by the love that he received as he crossed over, despite the way he lived his life, let's say, against God. And as the medium, I could feel the emotion, but I couldn't even verbalize in words the humble and humility and respect that he had as he crossed over, that there's this being that he all throughout life rejected, still now when he crosses over, received him with the most incredible love, that it's almost brought him to like this emotion of humbleness and humility. But there was not any point of shame in that vibration. There was not any point of, it was like, I get it now. So it wasn't like, I'm going to be damned to hell. It wasn't like, he was humbled by being touched and received. But it wasn't like, I got to go back and do it again. I got to fix. Now I got to be on this mission. What he was trying to tell her was, live your life knowing that you are unconditionally loved by this vibration. And it doesn't matter what you do, you will still be loved and received. And that alone was so incredibly powerful. To be able to relay that message from self-proclaimed atheist was so incredible, to feel that vibration. And really, it had nothing to do with saying you have to believe in God, but just knowing that there's nothing you could have done or could do that will make that energy not love you. And I have proof with the way I was received on the other side and the love that I felt when I crossed over. Man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's powerful.
I would say even going over and receiving that love, I think realizing that you are that love.
Yes.
That everything that you thought was that you were looking for on the outside, realizing that you've always been complete, that you've always been this presence, and realizing that throughout his whole life he was denying himself of experiencing this love because cutting himself off in different ways, and then stepping into the fullness of that and just being overwhelmed.
Yeah, overwhelmed and humbled.
Yeah.
Yeah, overwhelmed. That's a word. Yeah. I couldn't find the word. I knew what I was feeling inside through this spirit, but I couldn't verbalize it in words because it was so much more powerful than I could even verbalize, which was incredible. And again, there was an ounce of shame, an ounce of sadness, an ounce of remorse, like, oh, I lived this life, I feel regret by it. There was none of that. It was like, this is the now, and this is what's happening. But again, the message to her, because she was struggling with unforgiveness and she was struggling with stuff. And I have to say, like, how incredibly powerful and healing for her to be able to find that relief. Yeah. Because again, as we were talking about at some point, that Catholic guilt or that religious, like, I'm going to be punished. Mm-hmm. How empowering to be completely free from that in that space.
And again, going back to the idea of this is how I think things should be and this is how things are. And saying, like, I shouldn't be doing, even though this is where I am, I shouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. You know, so people create this feeling of guilt instead of just accepting,
this
you know,
is
like,
what it is.
When somebody's somebody's dying, you know, sometimes you're not in a place where you can be there for them, and that's okay. Yeah. You know, and not putting it out and saying, I should be there for this person, or if this person, my friend's going through this, and I'm not in a place to be there for them, feeling bad about it. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't do that.
And that's what I say, just do the best you can.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have a question. So, that man had that experience, but who's to say that not all souls cross over and have an experience like that? Because, for example, we have things like hauntings, spirit attachments to things, right? They're clearly not in the light, but they're in some vibration.
Well,
right?
I think the problem is you're trying to connect two things that actually aren't the same thing. So I think what happens, I think, when, and this is my perspective, is that when we cross over, you know, when we pass on, we step into the fullness of all that is, of who we are, and all that junk is left behind, but it's still an energetic vibration that exists. I think a lot of times when mediums are giving readings and they, you know, they connect to that darker stuff, it's like they're not really connecting to who that person is now. They're connecting to that energetic junk that's left behind. Gotcha. So I think hauntings are just residual energy of that, and sometimes it can be intelligent and it can create on its own, because I think that thought forms can think. There can be ones that go on and live and experience just kind of like people do here.
But it's not necessarily the essence of that person, particular person.
Yeah. It's not.
Well, I don't work in that energy, so I don't know. So coming from that perspective, like, well, what about this stuff?
Yeah. Well, I think I think some of the hauntings and stuff are just like almost like a loop, you know, that they tap into a different dimension of things that, you know, just constantly happen. And it's kind of like just a photograph of time, like you see like in Gettysburg. You know, people see soldiers, the same souls all the time, and top of the stairs or something, and it's just a time loop that's caught a snippet of that particular moment.
Such a strong energetic imprint that it can be perceived by people. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's not necessarily that soldier is stuck here. You know, he's going on. It's just that the emotional, like you say, fingerprint is still there, and people can tap into that. So it doesn't have anything to do with actually the essence of the person that's crossed over.
And then think of the life that people give to certain experiences too. So, what the hell's her name? The lady who murdered her parents. I can't think of her name.
Lizzie Borden?
Yeah, Lizzie Borden. So think of because of the story that's told, the energy that's projected there. So there's this, I think that there's this living thought form that exists there of all the negative aspects of her. I don't think she's been there at all since she crossed over. She stepped into all she was. But I think there's this energetic imprint that's then created not just by what she left behind, but all the focus that's upon that.
Right. Because so those locations can technically be haunted because all the attention and energy from us.
Yeah, we're manifesting
it. And just bringing it back up. That makes
so much sense. Because I have to say, I have no experience with that. Thank God. Like, that's not the type of work that I do, but from what you see, there's all this stuff, and you wonder, like, well, what's the difference? Because I see all this love, I see all this transformation, but yet there are plenty of...
I had a reading once with a lady that was having physical manifestations happening to her, and she thought it was her ex-husband. And so we sat down and said we could bring the ex-husband through, and we did. And, you know, long story short, I mean, he had a lot of anger towards her because she had basically kicked him out, and he was a gambler and a drinker and, you know, the whole 9 yards, and probably abused her. I'm not sure. And so his anger, he actually came in, because when I do a reading, if it's someone that's of a lower vibration, I do it very rarely. But if I do, I ask them to come with protection. And they do. And this man showed up for the reading. He had 2 guides with him, angels or guides that were with him, to keep him, to keep his energy intact and to not to bring more harm to the ex-wife. And he was verbal, and he dropped the F-bomb a lot, which I didn't necessarily, bring through to her. I just said, he's being very, he's a lot of swears, and she goes, oh yeah, that's him. But I wasn't going to let him cast that energy into the space. So we found out it was definitely him that was, contacting her and doing this manifestations. And she said fine, and that was the end of that. She actually was feeling someone grab her underwear and doing some other things. So, everything kind of panned out after that, and things got quiet after that. After we said, excuse me, we're going to let this go. And so she was calm. She knew everything about it. And she said, no, I don't want you in my energy anymore. And she set that boundary. Yeah. So he could not affect her anymore. So for about a month later or 6 weeks later or something, she came up, she goes, everything was great. She said, until last night, and then things started happening again. So she wanted me to come over and see what was going on. And I just opened up there, and I could feel what was happening I said, are you talking to him or anything like that? Because if you do talk to him, you're drawing them in. Yeah. She says, oh, no, I would never talk to him. He goes, he is such a bum and a deadbeat. And I could feel the energy she was bringing up, and I'm saying, oh, she is. She's attracting him into her energy. And I said, you might not be talking to him, but you're talking to him emotionally, because I just asked you this, and you're already lit up like a match.
And I think what she was bringing through wasn't, again, who he became. It was the junk left behind from him.
Right. It was the anger, the emotion, all the bad stuff.
But in you wanting to connect to help her, you're connecting to what's bothering her, which is that junk. So it's not that you weren't connecting right. You were doing your job right. Right. But the part that she was doing was all the leftover garbage that she still associated with him. She kept drawing into herself.
Even maybe he was at a certain level where he was constantly in that, even on the other side, and he's getting help, whatever. The point is, she was grasping on to that anger that she held against her husband, and that's what was drawing it in, to the point it was causing physical and materialistic manifestations. And then I realized, I'm like, there's nothing we can do for you unless you release that anger and guilt, or anger and whatever you have towards them, because you're bringing it in.
And I would say that,
and that happens in a lot of poltergeist situations with people in homes.
Oh yeah. And I would say that she was still associating herself as being the victim. So her manifestation of that was, again, pulling through this energy that she associated with her husband. I don't think her husband was there at all. I think that, because I really believe that when we die, the essence of who we are becomes part of all that is, and instantly becomes part of that love. But I do think that like I said, the other junk can be left behind, and if fed enough, it takes on a life of its own.
Well, she didn't cut the cord. She was still connected to him.
Especially with the addictions and the
drinking,
earthly attachments with pills and depression
and
the
anger of it. She kicked him out, so he was homeless after that. So there was a lot of such situations going on, but she didn't. She held on to a lot of things and was drawing him in, and that's how it played out. So it wasn't just a point. It was a two-way street.
Yeah.
I want to mention too about the whole atheist thing, and because we may have somebody with that belief system who is tuning in just curious or whatever. I want to say that also too, you got to believe what you got to believe. Yeah. You have to feel the way you have to feel. This isn't proving or disproving anything. If that's the space that you want to be in, there's nothing wrong with that. If this is the vibration that you're in.
Atheism can be one of the most positive viewpoints to take for people, because, again,
just discernment.
No, it's more about, I think sometimes people look at the idea and say, look, well, I know there's another life. I know I'm going to be reincarnated, so it's okay if I don't get it right this time. Whereas an atheist says, I've got one lifetime. I got to live this to the fullest.
Yeah.
Whatever I want to do, I need to do that now because. So I think there's a lot of ways that, and this is what I was talking about before,
about it,
of how I think ego slips into beliefs of the afterlife, where people think like, well, like, I know that when I die, I'll be happy in heaven, so I just got to get through this crap. I just got to deal with this crap now, but when I die, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Or they say, it's okay if I don't get it right this time because, I got the next lifetime. It's like, well, bullshit. If you feel like there's something that needs to change, you got to change it now.
Yeah.
And how empowering is it for an atheist to say, I've only got this one chance?
But that's if they do.
What do you mean if they?
Like if I don't know of the belief system, I don't know, but if that's what they do, there are other ones who just push everything out. They become more angry and more separate.
And that's why I say it
and I
can
don't know
be,
if that's atheist or not. I don't know.
Well, it can be empowering. Again, any belief system can be empowering or disempowering depending on the perspective you take from it. But I do think that there's something really beautiful about somebody saying like, this is my chance to be happy, and this is my chance to express all that I can be.
I don't know if atheists believe that. I think they believe like I can do whatever I want. It's not going to make a difference because when you're dead, you're dead.
Well, I think a lot of, like, I know them, like the humanists, their whole idea behind it is like, just be a good human, don't worry about that other stuff afterwards. Just be a good human now. And I think that...
No, that's true.
There's something to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think every belief system has truth behind it.
Oh, yeah.
And again, that's where you take a little of this, take a little of that, take a little of this.
It has to, because we're all connected to that source energy. So we're all bringing through different aspects of the truth. It's just...
It's all different flavors.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's all ice cream.
It's true. And again, that also is the reminder to disconnect from what they're doing and keep doing what you're doing. If we lived in a world where people minded their own business in a way, listened to their soul, did what was according that brought them true happiness and joy, and again, was fulfilled in that helping the people around you, taking care of yourself, drinking your water, eating healthy, getting your sleep, following your true calling, we would live in a much better world. The problem is everybody's into everybody else's business because it's become so external.
Well, because they're afraid to deal with their own shit.
So
say that again.
Yeah, basically. So instead of worrying, dealing with your own stuff,
deal with your shit.
You project it on someone else. If you're getting angry about something, it's because you haven't dealt with something inside of you. And instead of looking at that, you just get angry at the projection. It's like looking at a mirror, right? And being mad at the mirror because it looks a certain way or because it does something. It's like you look in the mirror and be like, why are you frowning at me? You asshole, stop frowning at me. No, now you're yelling at me? Oh, I see how it is. That's what you're doing. That's what people are doing when they're getting upset at the outside. Well, it's like, dude, stop and just realize that the mirror is you.
Yes.
That's right. And they're yelling at us like we're all walking mirrors.
Yep. And also, too, I think that's where people's pushes God out because they were like, he did this to me. If God was real, I wouldn't be going through this. Yep. And again, it's still passing the blame. So they're putting this fire energy towards this energy, just like you said, the reflection of their own selves, because God isn't separate from us. We're all part of this makeup and made up of this energy vibration, right? So the thing is, when people say, well, where was God when this has happened? And God took so-and-so from me, and that passes the buck. Instead of internalizing and, again, working through, and we're not talking about on your own, get support, get help, get, a life coach, a therapist, somebody to work with you. And again, if you're in that vibration, the right person will come along. It always does. Instead of blaming and creating this monster of this energy in so many other ways, people do it with their bosses. Like, oh, they're making money and blah, 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 blah. Go make your own money. Go do it, right?
Yeah, a lot of people blame God for doing things. If there was a God, he would not allow this to happen.
Well, why? Because as humans, and we allow it to happen.
Exactly.
Right?
Totally.
It's life. Life happens. And I think that people think that their God should protect them from bad things.
But also God is what's the word I want to use? Like, do for yourself. Like, I'm not going to do it for you. Like, you have to do the work. Like with anything.
God said, about, I forgot it now.
Oh, darn.
It's a classic movie.
God helps those who help themselves.
Ding!
There we go.
See, I got him to say it.
It's exactly true. When you're saying, well, I'm creating all this drama, and I'm creating all this pain, and I'm creating all this angst and this disruption in my life, and something bad happens, oh, that was God. You know, and I think it's part of taking ownership. Ownership, just like in the last we talked about the laundry.
Yep.
I took ownership in it. I totally owned it. But again, I moved through it. And again, I didn't blame God. He did that for me. But I think that's what happens. And I think that people get further and further away from that unconditional love vibration. And they get so deep and so sad and so consumed by, like, say, materialism or consumerism. And they get so caught up that they're so far away that they're just creating more bills and more pain and more suffering and not realizing it. Right?
Make sure you tap into our last show, and you'll hear the reference about what Gladys did, what terrible things she did with the laundromat. But you'll have to the show before this, so make sure you check it out.
Sorry, not sorry.
But you're right. I agree with what you were saying.
Hi everybody. If you like what you watched, please subscribe on YouTube and like us on Facebook. And check out our website at alwaysconsiderthesource.com.
Hey, if you want us to come out to your location and do a live setup, we'd love to do that. Continue to send in your questions, and we look forward to interacting with you.
And remember, always consider the source.